We are back on It's Always Game Day in Cincinnati. Double header mailbag. Thank you again for sending your questions. You can follow at LNDS Patterson, Bengals_Sands, and we'll go ahead and get to it right now. Darian says, who do you think play better at right tackle, Adeniji or Carmen? Why do you think Adeniji is not getting a shot?
Who do I think would be better like
Yeah,
this year? Yeah,
between
because
the two of them.
Carmen hasn't played right tackle. Ugh. That is just something that we'll have to see. My concern is I thought Carmen was better at left tackle than Adeniji was at right tackle, but that change isn't always easy. I always think of it like switch hitting in baseball. Better chance that the guy can do it than switch hitting, but switch hitting in baseball where some guys can just do it. They could just flip everything, different hand on top, different leg in the front, step in different, everything like that, and they're fine. They're still hitting, they're still able to do that. Maybe they have a preference, but they can easy just like that. And some guys just don't. They just can't move over, and the flip doesn't make sense to them, and they've practiced their whole life going the other way. It changes which leg are you driving off of, which leg are you kicking with, and your hands are different. Everything's different, especially in the pass game. So I just like to see it first before I try to give a definitive answer there. I will say I think this coaching staff and Pollock like Adeniji more than this fan base does. I would
Yeah.
not be surprised if he makes the team. And I wouldn't even be that surprised. I wouldn't be that surprised if he does win over Carmen for, let's say Jonah wins the right tackle job and he's the backup right tackle and Carmen's the backup left tackle. I wouldn't even be that surprised there until Collins is healthy, and then Collins would take that job most likely. But yeah, all that said, and let's not forget, Deniji did have some fine games.
The
Um,
Bills
I,
early on.
mm-hmm.
I mean, I
Well,
know it was only
there's that one. I didn't think he was terrible in the Patriots when he came in. I thought he wasn't even, I don't know, wasn't even the third worst offensive lineman in
like,
the season-ending game against the Ravens. And then the playoffs, he kind of fell apart. And
mhm.
just is what it is. Happened. It wasn't a disaster in the Bills game. Like none of the offensive linemen were.
Oh, they were
They
just
all played. They all dominated. It was the Great Wall of Cincinnati that game.
I will never forget that game. Unbelievable. Talking about offensive line all week. Don't you remember those conversations?
Oh
Cincinnati's
yeah,
this offensive line piece.
Greg Rousseau was getting all this hype of some dominant defensive lineman. Didn't hear anything from him. Ed
And then
Oliver got shut out.
the snow coming down was just the production of it was crazy. And Joe Burrow's on the sideline, and I'm like, oh no, this is a lot of snow. Will they be able to play in it? And yes,
Karras got
answer.
hurt in the middle of the game and still dominated. Yeah, that was a great performance from them. And then they all were bad against Kansas City. It was just oof. So yeah, I wouldn't count Adeniji out of the competition entirely. I don't think he wins the starting battle, but I would be shocked. But I will say that it is like a 5, maybe 10% chance that happens. Like if neither one of the other guys can move to right tackle well, because Jonah hasn't played there since the Obama administration, and Carmen hasn't played there in his life, as far as I know. So it could be an energy. I think that's the disaster scenario that Bengals fans will like. They are going to lose it if that happens. But he is the guy that can play right tackle. Can he play it well for a long period of time? I think that's been proven no. But can he play it well for a game? Maybe. And you're probably hoping that somebody else wins that job just because higher ceiling, higher chance that they are a great player. But that is all my thoughts on it. It's just I think the coaching staff and Frank Pollock and all these guys, they like him more than the fan base does. And while I would be shocked if he wins the battle entirely, I think he's in the mix.
Look, there are worse people you could have as a backup and maybe even a backup than Hakeem Adeniji.
Yeah.
And look, I agree with you. I do think the coaching staff is a little more on Hakeem Adeniji versus the fans. They look back at those games. You can look at the Super Bowl. You can look at the AFC Championship game, and you're like, oh my goodness, why is he out there? Of course you want an upgrade. Of course I don't want Hakeem Adeniji starting. I just don't on the offensive line. But I'm not down on him. I still feel like he can develop with Frank Pollock. Having other guys in this offensive line room for another year is going to be really helpful for him. And I I would actually, I'll say this is kind of a hot take. Unless everybody they feel is healthy and training camp goes well, when it comes to clearance, they feel good about Jackson Carman. Maybe Lyle Collins is ahead of the game more than we even think, which I don't. I think the smart thing to do is not rush him and let him fully get healthy. One thing he wasn't able to do last year. And I guess I'd be a little shocked if Hakeem doesn't make the team as a backup.
I
To
kind
be,
of agree with that.
yeah.
Not shocked, surprised. I'd be surprised if he doesn't make it. I wouldn't be shocked if he gets cut, but I would be surprised just because if Cody Ford steals that job, he steals that job. And I think only one of those two is going to make the team. I don't think both do.
How do you feel about Cody Ford?
I mean, I've not great based off of everything I see, but I've never actually watched him. Well, I can't say never. I haven't watched him in the past like 2 years, and he has been bouncing around. He basically got cut, but it was like a trade thing to the Cardinals, and then he wasn't pushing at all to play for the Cardinals offensive line, which is giant red flag because the Cardinals offensive line is name 2 Cardinals offensive linemen type situation.
No.
Yeah.
Harris
So,
Johnson.
Harris Johnson, yeah, I guess he's there. And well, the other one I can think of is left tackle. So we move. But like last year, hard to name those guys. They weren't very good, and he wasn't really pushing the start there. I think Joe Goodberry's looked at a lot of the Pro Football Focus data, and it has basically said he's been pretty darn bad. That is just all of that considered. Could this be the place he finds home and plays well? I hope all these guys do well. I haven't watched him personally. I don't know why he struggles or anything like that. I know he's a high pick and the Bills gave up, and then he went to the Cardinals and he didn't go and start there and make a big impact. So, and then he signs league minimum money with the Bengals. It's not a career that I think most people would look at right now and go, well, yeah, he's gonna push for that right tackle job. It's like, well, somebody would have to have believed in him by now, which maybe this is where he changes it, though. Maybe this is the big turnaround.
It was, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I felt like his signing was a few days after Orlando Brown, and Orlando Brown obviously has experience with him, and just being familiar with him. So maybe that will help him a little bit.
Oh, they played Oklahoma together.
Yeah. So I think that could possibly help. That maybe there was a little voice of like Orlando Brown saying, you know what, bring him in. Let's see what happens. He can be a backup. He can be someone who, he can mentor or just see what he does on the offensive line. Obviously we're talking about the right side of the ball, but I don't know. We'll see. The biggest thing for me, put the best guys out there and put the best guys as your depth piece who are available on the roster. And then you get rid of the rest. We've said it before numerous times. Everybody remembers what happened at the end of both of the last 2 seasons, and offensive line depth was an extreme problem, and it still terrifies me. But I just want Joe Burrow to have a legit offensive line, and I still am not down on last year's offensive line. I thought it was fine for the majority of regular season, but if it can be even better, then fantastic for Joe Burrow in this offense. So